Deaf boy draws falling building, and engineers spot serious construction error. The crumpled paper flew across the meeting room at Smith & Associates, hitting the whiteboard where the blueprints for the new Springview residences were displayed. 8-year-old Ethan James had just torn his sheet from the child's easel the secretary had set up to keep him busy, while his mother, Jennifer, discussed the final details of the apartment they had purchased in the development. The boy grabbed a fresh sheet and began drawing again, his brown eyes focused intently on the task. His small hands gripped the colored pencils with determination, creating strokes that might have seemed chaotic to any passing adult. Ethan couldn't hear the murmur of conversations around him or the sound of printers humming in the office. His deafness isolated him in a silent world, but his eyes captured every detail of his surroundings with a precision few noticed. Jennifer glanced at her son from the corner of her eye as she spoke with the sales agent about finish options. She had chosen that 12th floor apartment after months of saving and planning. As a public school teacher in Riverside, every penny had been set aside with sacrifice to secure a better future for Ethan and herself. The boy's father had left the family when he learned of the child's deafness, leaving Jennifer alone to face the challenges of raising a child with special needs. Ethan finished his drawing and stood from the small table, walking over to where his mother was talking. He gently tugged her blouse and pointed to the paper, proud of his creation. Jennifer smiled and took the drawing, expecting to see the usual colorful scribbles her son often made. But something on that page made her pause and look closer. The drawing showed a tall blue building clearly leaning to one side. Red streaks ran along the sides of the structure, like cracks or signs of movement. The sky was filled with dark clouds, and small figures resembling people were scattered on the ground around the building. Ethan had drawn the place they were going to live, but in a way that sent a chill down Jennifer's spine. The sales agent, Amanda, noticed Jennifer's worried expression and asked if everything was all right. Jennifer showed her the drawing, trying to laugh it off, but her voice trembled as she said Ethan had a very active imagination. Amanda looked at the paper and was equally unsettled by the accuracy of the details the child had included. The boy had drawn the exact shape of the Blossom Gardens building, down to the unique balcony on the top floor and the window arrangement matching the real architectural plans. Ethan tugged his mother's blouse again and began making rapid hand gestures. Jennifer had learned basic sign language to communicate with her son, but still struggled with more complex expressions. The boy seemed agitated, pointing at the drawing, and then upward, as if trying to explain something important about the building. His eyes were wide, and he shook his head vigorously while repeating the same motions. Amanda suggested it might be best to call someone from the technical team to take a look at the drawing, just to reassure Jennifer. She called the engineering department and asked someone to come up to the sales office. A few minutes later, Michael Thompson, the project's lead engineer, appeared at the door. He was a 45-year-old man with a neatly trimmed beard and an always serious expression when it came to construction matters. Michael greeted the two women and crouched down to Ethan's level, trying to make eye contact with the boy. Jennifer explained that her son was deaf and had made a concerning drawing of the building. Michael took the paper and carefully examined every detail. His expression gradually shifted from friendly to serious and then to visibly disturbed. The engineer called other members of his team over the intercom. Samantha, the structural engineer, Ryan Johnson, the foundation specialist, and Christopher Brown, the construction supervisor, quickly came up to the sales office. When the four professionals gathered around Ethan's drawing, the atmosphere in the room grew tense. Samantha was the first to break the silence, asking how a child could have drawn something so specific about the structural tilt of a building. Michael explained to Jennifer that Ethan's drawing showed signs that might indicate real structural issues. The tilt depicted by the boy matched exactly a potential flaw they had discussed theoretically during planning meetings, but considered impossible given the safety measures in place. Ryan pointed to the red marks on the drawing, saying they seemed to represent stress points. Only someone with technical knowledge could identify. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Ethan watched the adults discussing his drawing and grew even more agitated. He began making more elaborate gestures, pointing to different parts of the paper, and then to the office windows which offered a partial view of the construction site for Blossom Gardens. Jennifer tried to translate her son's gestures but admitted she couldn't fully understand what he was trying to communicate. Frustration was evident on the boy's face as he started stomping his foot and waving his hands more intensely. Samantha suggested it might be important to consult a sign language interpreter to better understand what Ethan was trying to say. Michael agreed, but also said they needed to immediately check the construction site conditions. He called the site and requested an emergency inspection of the foundations and the existing structure. The construction company had invested millions in the project, and any problem could mean massive losses, or worse, risks for the families who had already purchased apartments. Jennifer felt torn between pride that her son had caught the professionals, attention and fear that there might actually be something wrong with the building where she planned to live. She had invested all her savings into that apartment, and the thought of losing the money or living in a dangerous place terrified her. Ethan kept trying to communicate, but the language barrier made the situation even more frustrating for everyone involved. Amanda tried to calm things down, suggesting it might just be a coincidence and that children sometimes draw things without specific meaning. But Michael wasn't willing to dismiss what he saw. He had worked in engineering for over 20 years and learned to take any sign of potential structural issues seriously, no matter the source. Samantha also showed genuine concern, as she had noticed some minor problems during routine inspections that now took on new meaning when compared to Ethan's drawing. The meeting was interrupted when Michael's phone rang. It was William Davis, the construction company's CEO, who had been informed about the situation and demanded an immediate explanation. Michael stepped out of the room to take the call, leaving the others in an uneasy silence. Through the glass door, everyone could see him gesturing intensely while on the phone, clearly trying to explain a situation that would seem absurd to anyone who wasn't present. When Michael returned, his face was tense. William had ordered that no information about the design or any potential construction issues be disclosed until a full investigation was completed. The company had a reputation to uphold, and hundreds of sold apartments. Any rumors about structural problems could cause panic among buyers and lead to mass cancellations, which would be financially devastating. Samantha questioned the decision to keep things quiet, arguing that the safety of future residents should be the priority. Ryan agreed, saying that if there really were structural issues, they had a moral and legal obligation to investigate and fix them before anyone moved into the building. Christopher, always more cautious, reminded them that they still weren't sure Ethan's drawing represented something real and that perhaps they were overreacting. Ethan, sensing the tension in the room, moved closer to his mother and hid his face in her blouse. Jennifer hugged him protectively, feeling she had somehow put her son in a difficult situation. She didn't want Ethan to feel responsible for causing trouble, but she also couldn't ignore the possibility that he had noticed something the adults had missed. Michael proposed a plan. They would conduct a discreet inspection of the construction site that same afternoon, focusing specifically on the areas Ethan had highlighted in his drawing. If they found any irregularities, they would report them immediately to William and take the necessary steps. If everything was fine, they would consider the incident a misunderstanding and proceed with the original schedule. Samantha requested a copy of the drawing to compare it with the building's structural plans. She wanted to check if there was any correlation between the red lines Ethan had drawn and the high stress points calculated during the design phase. Ryan decided to review all soil and foundation reports to ensure he hadn't missed any critical details in the initial analysis. Jennifer asked if she and Ethan could join the inspection, but Michael explained it would be too dangerous to bring a child to a construction site. Besides, their presence might draw unnecessary attention from the workers, who could start asking questions about the unexpected inspection. He promised to call Jennifer as soon as they had results and suggested she take Ethan home and try to talk to him more about the drawing. Amanda walked Jennifer and Ethan to the office exit, assuring them the construction company would stay in touch about any developments. She also said that regardless of the inspection's outcome, the company would ensure Jennifer felt safe and satisfied with her purchase. But her words sounded more like corporate protocol than genuine concern. In the elevator, Jennifer looked at Ethan and tried to ask in basic sign language about the drawing. The boy responded with quick, complex gestures she couldn't follow. The frustration of not being able to fully communicate with her own son weighed on her constantly, but at that moment, it felt especially critical. Ethan had something important to say, and she couldn't understand. When they reached the parking lot, Jennifer decided she needed help from Melissa Anderson, a sign language interpreter who worked at Ethan's school. Melissa had become an important figure in both their lives, not just as a professional, but as a friend and advisor. Jennifer called her immediately, explaining the situation and asking her to come to their house as soon as possible. Melissa, a 35-year-old woman with 15 years of experience interpreting for the deaf community, was intrigued by the story Jennifer told. She had been with Ethan since he started school and knew the boy had an extremely sharp visual perception, compensating for his lack of hearing with a detailed observation of the world around him. If Ethan had drawn something specific about a building, there was likely an important reason for it. During the ride home, Ethan stayed quiet in the back seat, looking out the window. Jennifer watched him in the rearview mirror and noticed he seemed troubled, unlike his usual behavior after an outing. Normally, Ethan would get excited after visiting new places, enthusiastically gesturing about what he'd seen. But this time he was pensive, as if carrying a weight he couldn't share. At home, Jennifer prepared a snack for Ethan while waiting for Melissa to arrive. She placed the drawing on the kitchen table and tried to study it more closely. Every line seemed intentional, not the casual scribbles one would expect from an 8-year-old. Ethan had drawn windows in specific positions, included recognizable architectural details, and depicted the building's tilt with unsettling precision. When Melissa arrived, Ethan ran to hug her. She was one of the few people with whom he could communicate fully without barriers or misunderstandings. Melissa knelt to his level and began talking to him in sign language, asking about his day and the drawing on the table. Ethan's response was immediate and intense. Ethan told Melissa he had felt strange vibrations in the ground when they visited the construction company's office the previous week to sign the paperwork. He described how the vibrations were different from what he normally felt in buildings, more irregular and unsettling. During that day's visit, he had looked out the window and seen the building under construction, noticing something seemed off about its position relative to the other buildings in the area. Melissa translated for Jennifer with an increasingly serious expression. Ethan explained he had drawn the building collapsing because that was how he felt it when he was nearby. For a deaf child, environmental vibrations were a crucial source of information about the world. Ethan had developed a special sensitivity to detecting vibration patterns that indicated stability or instability in structures. Jennifer was impressed by the explanation but also worried. If Ethan had truly detected something through vibrations, it meant there was a real problem with the building. She immediately called Michael, who was already at the construction site with his team, beginning the promised inspection. Michael answered the phone amid the noise of construction machinery. Jennifer relayed the information Melissa had translated, explaining Ethan's sensitivity to vibrations and how it might have influenced his drawing. Michael grew even more concerned, knowing that structural issues often manifest through changes in a building's vibration patterns. The team of engineers was using measuring equipment to check the alignment and stability of the existing structure. Samantha had brought a theodolite to measure possible deviations in the building's vertical alignment, while Ryan was examining the foundations with a soil density detector. Christopher supervised the operation, ensuring the workers continued normally to avoid raising suspicions. The initial results were disturbing. Samantha discovered an almost imperceptible tilt in the structure, just 2 degrees, but enough to cause long-term problems. Ryan found inconsistencies in the soil density at certain points of the foundation, suggesting the ground wasn't as stable as the initial reports had indicated. Christopher noticed that some of the support pillars had micro cracks that shouldn't be present in such a recent construction. Michael gathered his team in a makeshift meeting room at the construction site to discuss their findings. The situation was serious but not catastrophic. The identified issues could be fixed with design changes and additional structural reinforcements, but this would mean delays of at least 6 months in the project's completion and extra costs, amounting to millions of dollars. Samantha suggested they should halt construction immediately until a definitive solution was found. Ryan agreed, arguing that continuing work with the identified problems would be irresponsible and dangerous. Christopher, considering the pressure they'd face from the company's management, proposed trying to find a way to make the repairs without completely disrupting the schedule. Michael called William to report the inspection results. The conversation was tense and filled with shouting on the other end of the line. William was furious about the situation and demanded the team find a way to resolve the issues without causing financial losses to the company. He threatened to fire the entire engineering team if they couldn't come up with a solution that kept the project on track. Meanwhile, Jennifer was trying to process all the implications of the situation. If there were real problems with the building, she could lose all her savings. The purchase contract had already been signed and she had made a significant down payment, representing years of savings. On top of that, she had already sold her current home, counting on the apartment being delivered on time. Melissa stayed with Jennifer and Ethan, helping translate other observations the boy had made about the building. Ethan mentioned that he'd noticed workers seemed worried when working in certain areas of the construction site, and that some machines made unusual noises when operating near the foundation. Even though he couldn't hear the sounds, Ethan sensed the altered vibrations they produced. Night fell without a clear resolution to the situation. Michael and his team remained at the site, taking more detailed measurements and trying to quantify the exact extent of the problems. William had called an emergency meeting with the construction company's board for the next morning, where he would need to explain the situation and propose solutions. Jennifer barely slept, thinking about all the possible outcomes and scenarios that could unfold. Ethan was also restless, waking up several times during the night. He had sensed the tension among the adults around him and knew his drawing had caused some kind of problem, even if he didn't fully understand the implications. The next morning, Michael called Jennifer with an update. The overnight analysis had revealed that the problems were more serious than initially thought. The tilt was gradually increasing as construction progressed, and there were indications that the soil beneath the building was slowly shifting. If nothing was done, the building could become structurally unsafe within a few years. The meeting at the construction company was chaotic. William faced pressure from the board to minimize costs and keep the schedule, while the engineers insisted on the need for extensive repairs. Some board members suggested the problems were minor and could be ignored, especially since they had been identified through a child's drawing, which seemed absurd to those without technical knowledge. Samantha vehemently argued for taking the situation seriously, regardless of how the problem had been discovered. She presented detailed technical data showing that the identified issues were real and potentially dangerous. Ryan supported Samantha, explaining that foundation problems tend to worsen over time and that ignoring them would be serious negligence. William was torn between doing the right thing and protecting the company's financial interests. The construction company had heavily invested in the Blossom Gardens project, and any delays or additional costs could jeopardize the company's other ventures. Moreover, the construction company's reputation was at stake, and admitting to structural issues could have lasting repercussions in the market. The board decided to seek a second opinion, hiring an independent engineering firm to conduct its own assessment of the situation. This meant a few more days of uncertainty, during which construction would continue as usual while they awaited the results of the external audit. Michael protested the decision, arguing that continuing construction with known issues was irresponsible, but he was ignored. Jennifer received the news with growing anxiety. Each day without a definitive resolution deepened her concerns about the future of her investments and plans. She tried talking to Amanda about the possibility of canceling the contract, but discovered the cancellation clauses were highly restrictive and would result in losing a significant portion of the money already paid. Ethan continued trying to communicate more details about his observations, but the frustration of not being fully understood was affecting his behavior. He became more withdrawn, spending hours drawing other aspects of the building he had noticed. Melissa visited daily to help with translation, and each conversation revealed new concerning details about Ethan's perceptions. The boy described feeling different vibrations in various parts of the construction site, suggesting the problem wasn't uniform. Some areas seemed more stable than others, which could explain why only part of the structure was showing issues. This information was relayed to Michael, who began suspecting there were more complex geological problems than initially thought. The external auditing firm arrived at the site 3 days later. It was a team of 5 specialists led by civil engineer Dr. Susan Mitchell. With over 20 years of experience investigating structural issues, they brought more advanced equipment than what the construction team had, including subsurface radar systems and highly sensitive vibration sensors. The auditor's presence on site sparked rumors among the workers, who began speculating about possible problems with the project. Christopher tried to keep the situation under control, explaining it was a routine inspection, but it was clear something unusual was happening. Some of the more experienced workers noticed the specialized equipment and began asking direct questions about the building's safety. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Dr. Susan and her team worked methodically for 2 days, examining every aspect of the structure and the land. They also requested a copy of Ethan's drawing, impressed by the child's precise observations. Susan remarked to Michael that she had seen similar cases where deaf children detected structural issues through vibrational perceptions that adults couldn't sense. The audit results confirmed and expanded the initial concerns. The ground beneath the building was settling unevenly due to an undetected geological issue during the preliminary studies. A layer of expansive clay had been disturbed during excavation, causing gradual shifts that manifested as the observed tilt in the structure. Even more concerning, the audit revealed the problem wasn't limited to the Blossom Gardens building. The same geological formation extended across a larger area, potentially affecting other projects by the construction company in the region. This turned a local issue into a much larger corporate problem, with financial implications that could reach tens of millions of dollars. William called an emergency meeting with all the company's investors and partners. News of multiple structural issues spread quickly through the city's construction industry, sparking speculation in trade media. Smith & Associates, which had built a solid reputation over 15 years, saw its stock plummet on the regional exchange. Jennifer followed the news with growing despair. What had started as a simple apartment purchase had turned into a financial and emotional nightmare. She sought legal help, consulting a real estate attorney about her options. The lawyer, Dr. Richard Patterson, explained the situation was complex. She might be entitled to compensation, but the process would be lengthy and costly. Ethan noticed his mother's distress and tried to comfort her the best he could. He made new drawings, this time showing the family happy in a safe home, trying to reassure her everything would be okay. Jennifer was moved by her son's efforts to cheer her up, but the financial reality was harsh and unrelenting. The construction company attempted damage control, offering affected buyers several options. They could cancel their contracts for a full refund, accept an apartment in another of the company's developments, or wait for structural repairs that would take at least 8 additional months. Each option had complications and limitations. Jennifer initially chose to wait for repairs, as she truly wanted to live in that building and the specific location she had picked. But she soon learned the necessary repairs were far more extensive than initially announced. The company would need to completely rebuild the foundation, meaning demolishing much of what had already been constructed. Other buyers reacted differently. Some families opted for immediate cancellation, preferring to lose part of their investment rather than wait for an uncertain solution. Others, especially those who had sold their homes to buy in Blossom Gardens, were left in desperate situations, homeless and with limited financial resources. One such family was Walter and Dorothy Miller, a retired couple in their late 60s who had sold the home they lived in for 40 years to buy an apartment in Blossom Gardens. They had nowhere to go and depended on the apartment's delivery for a place to live. Their situation deeply affected Jennifer, who decided to organize a support group among the affected buyers. The support group met weekly at Jennifer's home, with Melissa helping translate the adults' discussions for Ethan. The boy was fascinated to see how his drawing had led to so many consequences and impacted so many lives. He began making new sketches, now showing possible solutions to the problems he had identified. Michael, facing increasing pressure from William and the construction company's board, decided to involve Ethan more directly in the investigation process. He suggested to Jennifer that the boy visit other construction sites of the company to see if he could detect similar problems. The idea was controversial, but Michael was desperate to find solutions that would save the company's reputation and financial viability. Jennifer hesitated to expose Ethan to more responsibility and pressure, but Melissa argued that it might be beneficial for the boy to feel useful and valued for his special abilities. They set strict conditions. Ethan would only visit the sites. Accompanied by Jennifer and Melissa, the visits would be brief and pressure-free, and any sign of stress from the boy would result in an immediate halt to the process. The first visit was to the Springview Residences construction site, another project by Smith & Associates located across town. Ethan walked through the grounds with watchful eyes, his hands occasionally touching structures or the ground. After 20 minutes, he signaled to Melissa that the place felt solid and stable, unlike what he had sensed at Blossom Gardens. The second visit was more concerning. At the Sun Towers building site, Ethan immediately showed discomfort. He gestured to indicate irregular vibrations and pointed to a specific area of the foundation where he seemed to detect issues. A subsequent inspection revealed there were indeed minor problems in that spot, once again validating the boy's exceptional sensory perception. William, initially skeptical about involving a deaf child in investigating structural issues, began taking the situation more seriously when Ethan's findings consistently matched later technical analyses. He authorized a full investigation of all the company's projects, using Ethan as a preliminary detection tool, supplemented by detailed technical reviews. The process revealed that the construction company had consistently underestimated the geological challenges of the region where it operated. The rush to speed up construction and cut costs had resulted in inadequate soil studies for several projects. Ethan had inadvertently become the catalyst for a complete overhaul of the company's building practices, but the discoveries brought devastating consequences for Smith & Associates. The total cost of necessary repairs for all affected projects exceeded the company's financial capacity. William was forced to seek outside investors and consider the possibility of selling or merging with a larger construction firm. The company, which had been the pride of the Smith family for decades, now faced its greatest crisis. The employees lived in constant uncertainty. Many engineers and workers were laid off to cut costs, including several of Michael's close colleagues. Samantha and Ryan managed to keep their jobs, but with reduced salaries and expanded responsibilities. Christopher was promoted to operations director, taking on duties that had previously been shared among several people. Jennifer's personal situation worsened when she lost her job at the municipal school. Budget cuts in education led to the dismissal of several teachers, and Jennifer, lacking job security as a recent hire, was among the first to be let go. Now she faced not only uncertainty about her housing, but also how to support Ethan without a steady income. Ethan noticed his mother's growing stress and began showing regressive behaviors. He started having frequent nightmares again and became more dependent on Jennifer, reluctant to let her leave the house even for short periods. Melissa suggested he needed specialized psychological support to cope with the unintended pressure placed on his shoulders. The search for a psychologist, fluent in sign language and experienced with deaf children, proved more difficult than Jennifer had expected. Most professionals in the city lacked the necessary qualifications, and those who had them charged fees beyond Jennifer's financial means. She found herself trapped in a vicious cycle where the consequences of the situation created new problems she couldn't solve. The support group of affected buyers became an important source of solidarity and emotional strength. Walter and Dorothy Miller, the retired couple, developed a special fondness for Ethan, who reciprocated with drawings and affectionate gestures. They offered limited financial help to Jennifer, using part of their savings to assist her with some basic bills. Other group members also contributed however they could. Patricia Miller, a nurse who had bought an apartment for her daughter who would attend college, provided free medical care for Ethan. Robert Anderson, a retired lawyer, offered free legal guidance to all group members, helping them understand their rights and legal options. The group's solidarity stood in stark contrast to the growing coldness from the construction company. As the company's financial troubles worsened, William became less accessible and more defensive. Meetings with affected buyers grew tense and unproductive, with the company clearly prioritizing its survival over the well-being of its clients. Michael faced an increasing ethical dilemma. As an engineer, he had a professional responsibility to ensure construction safety, but as an employee, he was under pressure to find solutions that minimized costs for the company. He began questioning whether he should continue working for Smith & Associates or seek employment with a more ethical firm. Michael's decision became easier when he discovered William was considering speeding up some projects without implementing all the necessary corrections. This posed a direct risk to the safety of future residents, something Michael couldn't accept. He decided to resign, but not before documenting all the irregularities he had identified. His resignation caused an uproar within the company and caught the attention of local regulators. The Regional Engineering Board requested a detailed investigation into Smith & Associates' practices, and the local press began covering the story more intensely. Ethan's name started appearing in the news as the boy who uncovered the problems, bringing unwanted attention to the family. Jennifer tried to shield Ethan from media exposure, but it was difficult. Reporters began approaching her at home, wanting to interview the boy and understand how he had detected the structural issues. Jennifer refused all interviews, fearing the exposure could harm Ethan's emotional development or subject him to unrealistic expectations. The media attention had one positive side effect. Several organizations supporting the deaf community reached out to Jennifer offering help. The Association of Parents and Friends of the Deaf in the city provided free psychological support for Ethan, while a specialized school offered a full scholarship. These offers brought some relief to Jennifer, who had been feeling completely alone. Ethan, despite all the turmoil around him, remained a curious and observant child. He began drawing other buildings in the city, not necessarily identifying problems but simply exploring his keen visual perception of the built environment. Melissa suggested that perhaps Ethan might have a natural aptitude for architecture or engineering, and that this crisis could be the beginning of a special educational journey. The investigation by the Regional Engineering Board revealed several irregularities in the practices of Smith & Associates. The company had consistently cut corners on detailed geological studies, used materials of inferior quality than specified in some projects, and failed to properly implement certain safety measures. The findings resulted in heavy fines and the temporary suspension of the construction company's operating license. William attempted one last strategy to save the company, proposing a partnership with an international construction firm that could provide the necessary capital to complete the repairs. But negotiations fell through when the foreign company discovered the extent of the problems and decided the risk was too high. Smith & Associates was forced to declare bankruptcy, leaving hundreds of buyers in precarious situations. The construction company's bankruptcy created a complex legal scenario. The company's assets would be liquidated to pay off debts, but there was no guarantee this would cover all obligations to the buyers. Dr. Richard Patterson, the lawyer Jennifer had consulted, explained that the recovery process could take years, and even in the best-case scenario, buyers would likely recover only a fraction of what they had invested. Jennifer found herself facing the loss of nearly all her savings. The money invested in the apartment represented decades of sacrifice and planning, and now it seemed to have vanished completely. She was forced to accept financial help from the support group and charitable organizations to afford rent for a small house where she and Ethan could stay temporarily. Ethan showed impressive resilience in the face of hardship. Despite sensing his mother's stress, he maintained a positive attitude and continued trying to help however he could. He did small household chores, carefully organized his belongings, and even attempted to cook simple meals to surprise Jennifer when she came home from her job searches. Walter and Dorothy Miller's situation was even more desperate. They had lost their home and their savings, and at their age, starting over seemed nearly impossible. The support group rallied to help them, with each family contributing what they could to ensure they at least had shelter and basic meals. Jennifer, despite her own struggles, insisted on contributing, feeling responsible for the couple's suffering. Melissa continued volunteering as an interpreter for Ethan, refusing to accept payment from Jennifer in her current situation. She became not just a translator, but a confidant and advisor for the entire family. Her steady presence provided emotional stability for Ethan during an extremely turbulent time. The specialized school that had offered Ethan a scholarship proved to be an enriching environment where he could interact with other deaf children and develop his communication skills. There, he met other students who also had heightened sensory perceptions, as well as specialized teachers who understood how to channel these abilities productively. One of these teachers, Professor Michael Roberts, was a deaf architect who had developed innovative methods for teaching design and construction concepts to hearing-impaired children. He was fascinated by Ethan's observations about structures and began working one-on-one with the boy, developing exercises that combined art, math, and basic engineering principles. Under Professor Michael's guidance, Ethan began creating more technical and precise drawings. He learned to use rulers and squares to create simple blueprints and to represent three-dimensional structures on paper. His drawings became educational tools for other students, showing how careful visual observations could reveal important information about the built environment. Meanwhile, Michael had found employment at a structural engineering consulting firm that specialized in investigating construction problems and failures. His experience with the Smith & Associates case became a valuable asset, and he quickly established himself as an expert in detecting and fixing complex structural issues. Michael kept in touch with Jennifer and Ethan, not just out of friendship, but because he recognized the unique value of the boys' insights. He proposed creating a pilot program where deaf children with special vibrational sensitivity could be trained to assist in structural safety inspections. The idea was revolutionary and could open new career possibilities for people with hearing impairments. The pilot program attracted attention from universities and research organizations interested in studying how sensory disabilities could lead to exceptional compensatory skills. Ethan became one of the first participants in the program, working with researchers to develop protocols that could be taught to other deaf children. Jennifer found work as an administrative assistant at a mainstream school that was developing an inclusion program for deaf students. The pay was less than what she had earned as a teacher, but the job was stable and allowed her to contribute to improving educational opportunities for children like Ethan. She also began studying sign language more seriously, determined to become fluent in her son's native language. The legal case against Smith & Associates continued to move slowly through the court system. Dr. Richard Patterson had managed to certify a class action lawsuit representing all affected buyers, increasing the chances of recovery and reducing individual legal costs. But he warned that even in the best-case scenario, the case could take 5 years or more to resolve. During this time, Jennifer and other members of the support group became active advocates for stricter construction industry regulations. They attended public hearings, wrote to political representatives, and worked with consumer organizations to push for changes that would protect future buyers from similar situations. Ethan inadvertently became a symbol of this regulatory reform campaign. His story demonstrated how serious structural problems could go unnoticed by experienced professionals and how alternative perspectives could reveal significant risks. Engineering. organizations began including discussions about Ethan's contributions in seminars on structural safety. Ethan's reputation as a structural problem detector spread beyond local professional circles. He received invitations to visit construction sites in other cities, always accompanied by Jennifer and Melissa, with the understanding that he was a developing child, not a professional inspection tool. Samantha and Ryan, the engineers who had worked with Michael on the initial investigation, found jobs at companies that valued their experience with complex structural issues. They kept in regular contact with Ethan, not just out of gratitude, but because they recognized he had taught everyone the importance of considering non-traditional perspectives in solving technical problems. 2 years after the crisis began, some families in the support group started finding stability in their new situations. Patricia Miller, the nurse, had purchased a smaller but more affordable apartment, and her daughter was thriving in college. Robert Anderson, the retired lawyer, used his legal expertise to help other families in similar situations, turning a personal tragedy into a mission of community support. Walter and Dorothy Miller faced greater challenges in adapting. At their age, starting over was emotionally and physically demanding, but the constant support from the group, and especially the affection they developed for Ethan, brought purpose and joy to their days. They became adoptive grandparents to the boy, providing emotional stability that benefited the entire family. Jennifer's financial situation gradually stabilized. In addition to her work at the school, she began offering private sign language lessons to families with deaf children. Her personal experience navigating the educational system with Ethan made her an especially effective and understanding instructor. The extra income allowed her to start saving again, though far more cautiously than before. Ethan continued to thrive at his specialized school, where his unique abilities were valued and nurtured. He became a mentor to younger deaf children, teaching them how to use their heightened sensory perceptions productively. His drawings evolved from simple observations to basic architectural designs, demonstrating an intuitive grasp of construction and design principles. Professor Michael Roberts established a formal architecture program for deaf students, with Ethan as one of its first participants. The program combined art, math, science, and technology in ways that leveraged the unique perceptual strengths of hearing-impaired students. Ethan excelled in the program, developing increasingly sophisticated projects. Michael Thompson, now established as an independent consultant, proposed a collaborative research project between his firm, the local university, and Ethan's school. The goal was to develop standardized protocols for using non-traditional sensory perceptions in detecting structural issues. Ethan would be a key participant, but not the only one, as other deaf students demonstrated similar abilities. The research project attracted funding from government agencies interested in improving construction safety, providing resources to equip the school with specialized labs where students could learn structural engineering through methods tailored to their specific sensory needs. Jennifer inadvertently found herself becoming an expert in advocacy for families affected by construction issues. Consumer organizations began consulting her on how to support families in similar situations. She developed a resource manual and strategy guide that was distributed nationwide, helping other families navigate similar crises. The class action lawsuit against Smith & Associates finally reached a settlement after 3 years of litigation. The agreement provided partial compensation for affected buyers, covering roughly 60% of their losses. For Jennifer, this meant recovering a significant portion of her savings, allowing her to consider buying a home again. But she had learned to be far more cautious with real estate investments. She spent months researching different properties, always taking Ethan along to feel each one she considered. His perception became a valuable tool, not just for detecting problems, but for identifying exceptionally well-built structures. Ethan, now 12 years old, had grown into an articulate and confident young man. His early experience with responsibility had made him mature beyond his years, but he still maintained the curiosity and enthusiasm characteristic of childhood. He continued to draw, now as a personal hobby alongside his technical applications. The family found a small but well-built house in a quiet neighborhood of the city. Ethan immediately approved of it, describing through sign language that the structure felt solid and happy. Jennifer bought the house using the compensation from the legal settlement, finally providing lasting housing stability for the family. The original support group evolved into a formal consumer rights advocacy organization in the construction industry. They successfully pushed for changes in local regulations, including stricter requirements for geological studies and independent safety inspections. Their efforts saved other families from situations similar to what they had faced. Walter and Dorothy Miller also found a resolution to their situation. With part of the settlement compensation and support from the group, they managed to buy a small apartment in an older but structurally sound building. They remained a constant presence in Ethan's life, whom he visited regularly and considered his grandparents. William Davis, the former president of the bankrupt construction company, faced legal and professional consequences for his negligent decisions. He was barred from running construction businesses for 5 years and faced several personal lawsuits. The experience forced him to reevaluate his priorities and business practices, eventually leading him to seek work in organizations focused on responsible social construction. Samantha and Ryan established their own consulting firm, specializing in safety inspections and structural problem correction. They implemented protocols that included consultations with trained deaf individuals as part of their standard evaluations. Their company thrived, built on a reputation for thoroughness and innovation in inspection methods. Christopher, the former construction supervisor, found a new career as an instructor at a technical school for construction. He used the Blossom Gardens case as a teaching tool to educate future professionals about the importance of ethics and safety in construction. His students learned not just building techniques, but also professional responsibility. Melissa continued working as an interpreter, but also became an activist for deaf rights. Her experience with Ethan and his family motivated her to fight for better access to interpretation services and recognition of the unique contributions deaf individuals can make to society. The architecture program for deaf students developed by Professor Michael Roberts expanded to include partnerships with engineering and architecture firms. Graduating students found specialized jobs where their unique perceptual skills were valued. Ethan became an inspiring example for other students, proving that disabilities could be turned into professional strengths. 4 years after the initial discovery of the problem at Blossom Gardens, Ethan had established himself as an exceptional young man with an intuitive understanding of structures and design. He continued his regular studies while participating in research projects and specialized consulting. His reputation had spread beyond local borders, attracting interest from academic and professional institutions across the country. Jennifer built a fulfilling career combining her educational work with consulting for families navigating similar crises. She became a respected voice in consumer rights and educational inclusion. Her experience transformed a personal tragedy into a mission to help others. Ethan's story inspired significant changes in the local construction industry. New inspection protocols included non-traditional methods for detecting issues, and there was greater awareness about the importance of diverse perspectives in ensuring structural safety. Companies began hiring consultants specialized in sensory detection of structural problems. Michael established a training center where people with different sensory abilities could learn to apply their unique perceptions to improve construction safety. Ethan was often invited to demonstrations and training sessions, always accompanied by Jennifer, and with care to balance his special responsibilities with his need to be a normal child. The local university established a scholarship in Ethan's name for deaf students interested in engineering and architecture. The scholarship not only covered educational costs, but also provided access to specialized equipment and mentorship programs. Ethan became the scholarship's ambassador, encouraging other deaf youth to explore careers in technical fields. 5 years after the crisis began, Jennifer and Ethan had found a new equilibrium. They faced and overcame immense challenges, turning a devastating situation into opportunities for growth and social contribution. Ethan remained a curious and affectionate child, but now with a mature understanding of how his special abilities could benefit others. The small house they bought became a place of peace and stability. Ethan had his own studio, where he could draw and work on architectural projects. Jennifer converted a room into an office, where she offered consulting services and coordinated activities for the consumer advocacy group. The house often welcomed visits from other members of the original group, maintaining the bonds forged during the crisis. Ethan developed deep friendships at his specialized school and in the local deaf community. He participated in adaptive sports, art groups, and community service projects. His experiences in construction had sparked interest in many related fields, including urban planning, environmental sustainability, and universal design. Jennifer found love again with David, a math teacher who had learned sign language to better communicate with deaf students. David admired Jennifer's strength and determination and developed a special relationship with Ethan, respecting the unique dynamic between mother and son. Their relationship grew slowly and naturally, providing additional emotional stability for the family. Jennifer and David's wedding was a community celebration, with all members of the original support group participating. Ethan served as the ring bearer, proud to see his mother happy and to gain a stepfather who understood and valued him. The ceremony was conducted in both English and sign language, symbolizing the inclusion and acceptance that had become central to the family's life. David brought mathematical knowledge that perfectly complemented Ethan's visual and perceptual skills. Together, they explored advanced concepts of geometry and physics applied to architecture. David also helped Ethan develop computer programming skills, opening new possibilities for structural visualization and modeling. By age 14, Ethan had become a recognized figure in the regional engineering and architecture community. He regularly presented at professional conferences, always emphasizing that his abilities were just one part of collaborative teams that included engineers, architects, and other specialists. His humility and maturity impressed seasoned professionals. The research program that included Ethan produced significant results, leading to new inspection techniques adopted by construction companies across the country. The findings showed that people with different sensory configurations could detect issues that traditional methods missed, resulting in safer and more durable buildings. Ethan began considering his plans for high school and college. He was interested in studying architecture, with a focus on accessible design, combining his personal experience with disability and his technical knowledge of construction. Several universities had already expressed interest in recruiting him, offering specialized programs that would accommodate his specific needs. Jennifer continued her advocacy work, now as a regional coordinator for a national consumer protection organization. She traveled regularly to speak at conferences and train other advocates, but always kept Ethan as her top priority. She had learned to balance her professional responsibilities with her family's needs. The consumer rights organization that had grown from the original support group became a significant political force in the region. They successfully implemented some of the country's strictest construction regulations, serving as a model for other areas. Their efforts were often cited in academic studies on effective grassroots activism. Walter and Dorothy Miller celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary at a party organized by the support group. Ethan created a special drawing for them, showing a couple holding hands in front of a solid, enduring house, symbolizing the stability they had finally found after years of uncertainty. The drawing became a symbol of resilience and recovery for the entire affected community. Patricia Miller saw her daughter graduate from college and secure a job at a medical technology company. Robert Anderson published a book on consumer rights based on his experience with the Smith & Associates case. Every member of the original group had found ways to turn their traumatic experience into positive contributions to society. The site, where the Blossom Gardens building was supposed to be constructed, was eventually sold to a different company, which built an apartment complex using the strictest safety and quality standards. Ethan was invited to inspect the construction at various stages, always confirming that this time, everything was being done correctly. The new building became a symbol of how tragedy can lead to lasting improvements. William Davis, after completing his professional suspension, found work at a non-profit that built housing for low-income families. His experience with the costs of negligence turned him into a passionate advocate for responsible construction practices. He occasionally consulted Jennifer and Ethan on projects, seeking their expertise to ensure quality and safety. Samantha and Ryan Johnson expanded their consulting firm to include professional ethics training for engineers and architects. They used Ethan's story as a central case study, demonstrating how professional humility and openness to unconventional perspectives can prevent disasters and save lives. The training center established by Michael Thompson became an international model for inclusive engineering education. Students from various countries visited the center to learn about inspection methods that incorporated diverse sensory skills. Ethan often served as an assistant instructor, teaching visitors about vibrational perception and detailed visual observation. At 15, Ethan published his first article in a youth architecture magazine, describing his techniques for detecting structural problems through sensory perception. The article was translated into multiple languages and used in educational programs worldwide. Ethan inadvertently became a global ambassador for the unique capabilities of deaf individuals. Melissa opened a sign language school specializing in training construction professionals to communicate with deaf workers and consultants. The school thrived, filling a critical industry need and creating employment opportunities for qualified deaf individuals. Ethan occasionally gave lectures at the school about technical applications of sensory perception. Professor Michael was promoted to chair a new inclusive design department at the university. The department offered undergraduate and graduate programs in architecture and engineering, specifically designed for students with sensory disabilities. Ethan was among the first students accepted into the early admission program, beginning college courses while still completing high school. Ethan's story inspired an educational documentary about how diverse perspectives can improve construction safety and quality. The documentary was used in professional training and public education programs, spreading awareness about the potential contributions of people with disabilities to technical fields. Jennifer began writing a book about her experience navigating the educational and professional systems with an exceptionally gifted deaf child. The book would blend personal memoir with a practical guide for other families facing similar situations. Publishers expressed interest in the project, recognizing the need for resources on parental advocacy and nurturing unique talents. David completed a master's degree in mathematics education with a focus on teaching methods for deaf students. His thesis explored how advanced mathematical concepts could be taught through visual and tactile methods. Ethan collaborated on the research, providing insights into how deaf students process spatial and quantitative information. The family's small home became an informal networking hub for professionals interested in inclusive design and sensory-based structural problem detection. Jennifer regularly hosted dinners where engineers, architects, educators, and activists gathered to exchange ideas and develop collaborative projects. Ethan maintained normal teenage friendships despite his professional notoriety. He participated in school sports teams, hung out with friends, and dealt with typical adolescent challenges. Jennifer and David worked carefully to maintain balance between his special responsibilities and normal developmental experiences. The original support group continued meeting annually to celebrate their recovery and maintain friendships forged during the crisis. Each reunion included updates on personal and professional developments, but also planning for community service activities. They had become a permanent force for positive change in their community. At 16, Ethan received a full scholarship to study architecture at a prestigious university with a pioneering universal design program. The university created special accommodations for his needs as a deaf student, including advanced visualization technology and interpreters specialized in technical terminology. Jennifer faced the prospect of Ethan leaving for college with mixed feelings of pride and anxiety. They had been through so much together that the idea of separation, even if temporary and positive, was emotionally difficult. But she knew Ethan was ready for this next phase of his exceptional journey. Ethan's decision to study universal design was influenced by his personal experience navigating a world primarily designed for hearing individuals. He wanted to create spaces and structures that were naturally accessible to people of all sensory and physical configurations. His vision was to eliminate the need for special accommodations by crafting universally functional environments. David decided to make a career shift, leaving his mathematics teaching position to work as an educational consultant for families with exceptional children. His experience with Ethan had given him unique insights into supporting the development of special talents while maintaining a healthy family balance. Jennifer and Ryan's consulting firm secured international contracts, spreading their innovative inspection techniques to countries around the world. They established training programs across multiple continents, always including modules on leveraging diverse sensory skills in structural safety assurance. Michael was elected president of the Regional Engineering Board, a position he used to implement educational and professional reforms based on lessons learned from the Blossom Gardens case. Under his leadership, the board established new ethical standards and continuing education requirements, emphasizing social responsibility and inclusion. The training center continued to grow, setting up exchange programs with international institutions. Deaf students from various countries came to study applied sensory perception techniques in engineering, while local students traveled to learn about inclusive approaches in other cultural contexts. Melissa was appointed to a national committee on accessibility in technical education. Her experience interpreting for Ethan during complex investigations qualified her to develop standard protocols for technical communication with deaf professionals. Her work helped open careers in engineering and architecture to many deaf individuals. Ethan's story influenced changes in engineering education nationwide. Schools began including modules on sensory perception and inclusive design in their standard curricula. Students learned not only construction techniques, but also how to work effectively with professionals who had different sensory abilities. The documentary about Ethan won several awards at educational film festivals and was distributed to technical schools internationally. The film became a standard tool for teaching diversity and inclusion in technical fields, inspiring a new generation of engineers and architects to value unconventional perspectives. Jennifer completed her book, which became a popular resource for families navigating educational and professional systems with exceptional children. The book was translated into multiple languages and used in training programs for educators and healthcare professionals. Jennifer began traveling internationally to speak about parental advocacy and nurturing unique talents. Ethan, now in his second year of university, maintained his connection with the community that had supported his family during the crisis. He regularly returned to visit Walter and Dorothy Miller, who had become symbols of resilience and recovery for the entire community. His visits brought joy to the elderly couple and reminded Ethan of his roots and responsibilities. During summer breaks, Ethan interned at Jennifer and Ryan's firm, applying theories learned in university to practical situations. He was developing new visualization techniques that combined computer technology with human sensory perception, creating more effective and precise inspection methods. Ethan James's university program included research on sensory architecture, exploring how different perceptual experiences could inform space design. His proposed undergraduate thesis would examine how built environments could be optimized for people with diverse sensory configurations, drawing from his personal experience and academic research. Jennifer and David celebrated 5 years of marriage by renewing their vows in the same church where they had originally wed. The ceremony included their entire extended community, which had formed around the family through their shared experiences. Ethan served once again as a ring bearer, now a proud young adult who cherished the stability and happiness his family had achieved. The consumer rights organization evolved into a regional foundation offering legal and educational support to families facing construction-related crises. The foundation operated a resource center, a helpline, and educational programs that had helped hundreds of families avoid or navigate similar situations. Ethan began considering his postgraduate plans, including the possibility of pursuing a master's degree in urban planning with a focus on accessible city design. Several universities had expressed interest in recruiting him for graduate programs, recognizing his unique contributions to the field of inclusive design. At 18, during his high school graduation, Ethan was invited to give a speech to his class. Speaking through sign language with simultaneous interpretation, he reflected on how seemingly devastating challenges could transform into opportunities for growth and contribution. His speech inspired not only his classmates, but the entire community that had followed his journey. Ethan's address was recorded and went viral on social media platforms, inspiring young people with disabilities worldwide to explore careers in technical fields. Universities and professional organizations began using the video in recruitment programs, showcasing the valuable contributions people with disabilities could make to engineering and architecture. Jennifer watched the speech with tears of pride, remembering the 8-year-old boy who had drawn a simple sketch that changed so many lives. Ethan's journey, from a frustrated child trying to communicate important observations to a confident young adult advocating for inclusion, had been extraordinary, yet deeply personal and human. During the summer before starting university, Ethan participated in an international exchange program studying sustainable construction techniques in several countries. The program was adapted to his needs as a deaf student, including specialized interpreters and advanced communication technology. His observations during the exchange deepened his understanding of how universal design principles could be applied. Globally, David was promoted to director of a new regional center for exceptional families, combining education, counseling, and research on nurturing unique talents. The center provided resources for families, training for professionals, and research opportunities for college students interested in special education and human development. Samantha and Ryan opened a second company specifically focused on training deaf professionals for careers in engineering and construction. The company offered intensive programs that combined technical education with applied sensory perception skill development. Ethan served as a junior consultant, helping to design curricula and teaching methods. Professor Michael Roberts published an academic book on inclusive education in architecture, using Ethan's experience as a central case study. The book became a standard text in architecture education courses, influencing how future architects were trained to work with clients and colleagues who had sensory disabilities. Melissa established a national training program for interpreters, specializing in technical engineering and architecture terminology. The program filled a critical gap, ensuring that deaf professionals had access to accurate communication in complex technical environments. The program was funded by a coalition of universities and engineering firms. Michael was appointed to a national commission on inclusion in technical professions, working to develop policies that would increase opportunities for professionals with disabilities. His experience with Ethan and other similar cases qualified him to influence systemic changes that would benefit future generations of technical professionals with disabilities. The small house where Jennifer, Ethan, and David lived was officially designated as a local historic landmark, recognizing its role as a center for social change and inclusive innovation. A commemorative plaque installed by the city described how the residence had served as a gathering place for activists and innovators working to improve construction safety and opportunities for people with disabilities. Ethan celebrated his 19th birthday with a party that included family, friends, mentors, and colleagues from across the country. The celebration reflected the diverse and inclusive community that had grown around him over the years. Guests ranged from university classmates to construction professionals who had learned to value the contributions of deaf individuals. During his second year at university, Ethan developed a computer application that allowed deaf individuals to communicate observations about structures through standardized visual interfaces. The application combined digital design with technical databases, enabling sensory observations to be automatically translated into understandable engineering reports. Ethan's application attracted interest from technology and construction companies, resulting in funding offers to develop a commercial version. Ethan chose to keep the application as an open-source project, freely available to professionals and organizations working to improve inclusion in technical fields. Jennifer was invited to join the board of directors of a national university, representing the perspectives of families with exceptional students with disabilities. Her experience navigating educational systems and advocating for opportunities for Ethan qualified her to influence policies that would affect thousands of similar students. The 20th anniversary of Ethan's original design was commemorated with an exhibition at the city's Science Museum, documenting how a child's simple observation had catalyzed lasting changes in construction safety and professional inclusion. The exhibition included Ethan's original drawings, investigation documents, and testimonies from people whose lives had been impacted by the story. Ethan, now graduating from university with academic honors, had accepted an offer to pursue a master's degree at an internationally recognized university known for its leadership in universal design. His proposed thesis would examine how diverse sensory perceptions could inform the development of safer and more accessible construction technologies. Ethan's university graduation was a community event, with hundreds of people who had been touched by his story attending to celebrate his academic achievement. The commencement speech was delivered by Dr. Susan Mitchell, the engineer who had conducted the original audit, reflected on how a child's curiosity and careful observation had revolutionized structural safety practices. Walter and Dorothy Miller, now in their 70s, were among the honored guests at the graduation. They had followed Ethan's entire journey from a frustrated child to a fulfilled young adult, serving as symbols of how communities can support and nurture exceptional talents. Ethan embraced them warmly, thanking them for all the love and support they had provided. During the graduation ceremony, Ethan announced the creation of a scholarship in Walter and Dorothy Miller's name for deaf students interested in engineering and architecture. The scholarship would be funded through donations from professionals and organizations that had benefited from innovations inspired by Ethan's story. Jennifer reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a seemingly simple drawing by an 8-year-old child. What had started as a devastating crisis had transformed into opportunities for growth, innovation, and social contribution that none of them could have imagined. The experience had taught everyone about resilience, community, and the value of diverse perspectives. David watched the graduation with paternal pride, remembering when he had first met Ethan as a bright but sometimes frustrated boy. Now, Ethan was embarking on a career that promised to keep breaking barriers and creating opportunities for other young people with disabilities. The transformation had been extraordinary for the entire family. Samantha and Ryan attended the graduation as proud mentors, knowing they had played a role in nurturing Ethan's talents. Their company continued to thrive, built on principles of inclusion and innovation that Ethan had helped inspire. They planned to offer Ethan a senior consultant position once he completed his master's degree. Melissa sat in the front row, interpreting the ceremony for Ethan and other deaf graduates. She had been a constant presence in Ethan's life for over a decade, facilitating communication in crucial moments and advocating for educational opportunities. Her own career had flourished through pioneering work in specialized technical interpretation. Michael, now a respected figure in national engineering, spoke during the ceremony about how professional humility and openness to unconventional perspectives were essential for meaningful technical advancements. He credited Ethan with teaching the entire engineering community about the value of cognitive and sensory diversity. Professor Michael Roberts, who had become a mentor and close friend to the family, presented Ethan with a special award for exceptional contributions to the field of inclusive design. The award included a commission for Ethan to design a new sensory architecture lab at the university, combining his technical skills with personal experience. After the ceremony, the family gathered at home for an intimate celebration. Ethan was excited about his future prospects, but also nostalgic about leaving the community that had been so central to his upbringing. He promised to stay closely connected and continue contributing to local projects even while studying abroad. That evening, Ethan made a final drawing of his childhood home, capturing not just the physical structure, but also the memories and relationships that had shaped his journey. The drawing included figures representing all the mentors, friends, and family members who had supported his growth over the years. Jennifer saved the drawing in a special album that documented Ethan's journey from that first unsettling sketch of the leaning building to his current sophisticated architectural designs. The album served as a tangible reminder of how seemingly insurmountable challenges could transform into extraordinary opportunities with persistence, community support, and vision. As Ethan prepared for the next phase of his educational and professional journey, the entire community that had grown around his story reflected on the lessons learned. They had discovered that seemingly devastating problems could catalyze innovation and growth, that diverse perspectives were valuable resources for solving complex issues, and that strong communities could support exceptional individuals in realizing their unique potential. The story that had begun with a deaf child trying to communicate concerning observations had evolved into a narrative about transformation, inclusion, and the power of community. Ethan became a symbol of how disabilities could be reframed as special abilities, and how children could contribute valuable insights to complex adult problems. 21 years after that initial drawing, Ethan was ready to embark on his master's studies, which would continue expanding the boundaries of inclusive design and structural safety. His journey had inspired lasting changes in education, professional practice, and societal attitudes toward the capabilities of people with disabilities. The community that had formed around the family during the original crisis continued to thrive, united by shared experiences and an ongoing commitment to inclusion and innovation. They had learned that some of the most important contributions to society came from perspectives that initially seemed marginal or unconventional. Ethan set off for his master's studies, carrying not only academic knowledge and technical skills, but also deep values about community, inclusion, and social responsibility. His education had been far broader than traditional curricula, including lessons on resilience, advocacy, and the power of turning challenges into opportunities. Ethan's story would continue to inspire future generations of students, professionals, and families facing similar challenges. His journey demonstrated that with the right support, unique perspectives could become extraordinary contributions to society, and that genuine inclusion benefited not only individuals with disabilities, but entire communities. The end of the story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your honest thoughts in the comments. Do you think Ethan was truly special, or was he just an observant child? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.